Welcome to this exciting tutorial where we will build a fully functional 3D checkers game using Java. Whether you are a beginner or an experienced developer, you'll gain valuable insights into Java graphics and game development. Let's get started. First, we'll set up our development environment. Make sure you have JDK installed on your system, as well as an IDE for Java development. I recommend using IntelliJ IDEA or Eclipse. Let's dive into our project setup. Create a new Java project named 3D Checkers. Within this project, we'll organize our source files. Create a folder structure like this: src, main, java, com, checkers. Now, we need to include the necessary libraries for 3D graphics. For this project, we will use JavaFX. Ensure you have JavaFX set up correctly in your IDE. If you're unsure how to do this, consult the official documentation. Let's create our main application class called Checkers Game. This will be the entry point for our application. Run your application to ensure everything is set up correctly. You should see a blank window titled 3D Checkers Game. Excellent. Now let's create our 3D board. We're going to add a method that generates our checkers board. We'll use a 2D array to represent the board, where B will represent black squares and W will represent white squares. Now let's visualize the board. We will represent each square using JavaFX rectangles and position them accordingly in the 3D space. Let's call this drawBoard method in our start method so that the board gets drawn when we run the application. Okay, now we can run our application again, and you should see an 8x8 checkers board displayed in the window. The next step is to create the game pieces. We will create a class called CheckerPiece to represent individual pieces on the board. This class will hold the position and color of the piece. We'll need a method to create the pieces for both players. Let's add this method to the Checkers Game class. Let's also add a method to draw those pieces on the board. We can use circles to represent the checker pieces. Now modify the start method to call drawPieces method after drawing the board, passing the created pieces to it. Awesome! If you run the application now, you should see the checker pieces on the board. Now we need to implement the game logic allowing players to move their pieces. Let's start by adding a click event to the pieces so when a player clicks on a piece, we can select it for movement. We'll modify our drawPieces method to add an event handler. Now let's implement the handlePieceClick method. This method should track the selected piece and highlight it. Next, we need to implement the movePiece method, which will handle the logic for moving a checker piece. To validate a move, we need to ensure that the target square is empty and that the movement follows the rules of checkers. Let's implement check for that. Now let's modify the movePiece method to utilize this validation. Once the move is validated, we also need to remove the piece from the previous position and add it to the new one. However, we also need to update our graphical representation on the board. To refresh the board, we can clear the previous visualizations and redraw the board in pieces. Now update the movePiece method to call refreshBoard after moving the piece. Fantastic! You've now implemented movement logic for your 3D checkers game. If you run the application, players should be able to click and move their pieces. Next, let's implement the game rules to check for valid jumps or captures. This requires us to identify if a piece can jump over an opponent's piece. Similar to the previous validation, we will need to check if the target piece to capture is diagonally next to the from piece, and if the target square after the capture is empty. If a capture move is validated, we need to also remove the opponent's piece from the game. We can achieve this by maintaining a list of active pieces. You'll also need to ensure the graphical interface updates accordingly. Make sure after any capture, the board reflects the updated state. Next, we should implement a simple mechanism to switch players after each turn. This involves maintaining a current player state. After every valid move or capture, invoke the switch player method to alternate turns between players. To conclude, you'll want to integrate some basic game over logic to determine when a player has no valid moves left. You can call this method after each turn to check if the game should end and display an appropriate message. Congratulations! You have just built a complete 3D checkers game in Java. You have implemented the board setup, piece movement, capturing, player switching, and game over logic. I encourage you to enhance your game further. Perhaps add more features such as a scoring system, or even a graphical animation for moving pieces. Keep experimenting with your code and have fun with game development. If you found this tutorial helpful, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more programming videos. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know what you would like to learn next.